Okay. Hello. My name is Jude Duffy. I am 32 years old and currently living in Morocco. I'm number six of 10 in a family of home educated children. Well, we're grown up now, but we were home educated as children. And I was born in County Meath, Ireland, born and raised on an organic farm, very small organic farm, more like an allotment. And I saw a pretty big shift between, um, the home education in the 90s and home education in the noughties. I was born in 87, so most of my childhood education was in the 90s. And then by the end of the 90s, I was kind of already working and kind of out on my own. Um, I suppose when I was very young, my parents decided to choose a lifestyle of raising a family as self-sufficiently as possible. So we grew up on a farm, wasn't a big farm, but we did manage to produce quite a bit of food out of it, and we tried to grow as much of our own food as possible, um, as much as you could feed 12 people with. But yeah, and
I guess a small holding might be, what people would think of it as, because it was like a few acres. It wasn't like, enough to
yeah,
raise 20 cows on or whatever. You had a
yeah,
couple of
of course,
goats at one
yeah.
stage and
Yeah, and it wasn't even big enough to keep livestock on. We had at various points we had maybe one cow or one sheep, but it wasn't a sprawling ranch or anything like that. But we did pretty well out of it, and my parents purposely bought a house that was very kind of out of the way, very rural, and they wanted to. I suppose they wanted to. How could I word it? Sort of bring their kids up in as natural environment as they could, while still retaining a connection with the with society and the world at large. Um, when we were young, we didn't have central heating. My dad did all of our own DIY and home repairs. We never had a plumber, a carpenter, an electrician, or any other tradesman come into the house, except maybe for a cup of tea and a visit. Dad did all of our own building and home repairs, and we all chipped in. And a lot of our education was centered around practical, hands-on um, sort of practices. So we would help Dad and Mum out, you know, planting, weeding, doing the garden, chopping sticks, whatever needed to be done. And, always along the way, we'd always be quizzing them and asking questions. When I was little, I loved maths. So I remember I'd ask Dad, oh, give me another sum. We'd be out doing logs, and he'd be like, okay, 6 + 7. And I'd tell him, and he was always very encouraging. He understood the idea of positive reinforcement, my dad. He really was good at being like, very good, that's brilliant. And, he wasn't one to be like, oh, no, you got it wrong. No, I remember feeling delighted when I'd answer spell a word correctly or answer a math question correctly. In terms of, I suppose a lot of people have an idea of home education as being the exact same as in school, only in your own home. It wasn't like that at all for us. We did have, plenty of days where we were all sitting around the dinner table with our books out. The youngest ones learned how to read. The older ones maybe studying geography. I remember one of my sisters took a real interest in Sicily, and my mum and her wrote a letter to the ambassador, the Irish ambassador to Sicily, and they posted out tons of information and booklets and stuff about Sicily. And I remember thinking, God, if you ask and you shall receive. If you're interested in something and you go for it, you'll get. People will be happy to help you out.
that's a
So
really important thing. And I suppose we have to set that in the context for people watching this today, in that now if a child said, I want to learn about Sicily, one of us would go to her phones or laptops or tablets and we'd start Googling. But that whole process, I think, was so important for those of us back then, where you figured out there's someone in your community who knows more, even if that community extends from Meath up to Dublin, wherever the embassy is, and there's people interested. Like, you can just imagine the Sicilian ambassador getting a letter from a 9, 10-year-old in me then saying, that's great, we can send our flags and our maps out to somebody.
Yeah, they
I
probably
love
had
that notion.
piles and piles of those booklets lying around the office. They were like, finally, we can send out some of these now. Somebody's interested in them.
Before it goes out of date. And would you have ever had pen pals, Jude? I know that was important for some of the people in your house.
I'm pretty sure all 10 of us had pen pals. Um, I remember it was a much bigger deal among the older members of the family. They had pen pals in Switzerland and in Germany and all over the place. I had a pen pal, but I don't think I had numerous ones. It sort of became less popular as time went on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. Do people still have pen pals these days?
Yes, your niece writes to my daughter.
Oh, right, very good.
Yeah, people do have pen pals, and yeah, my 16-year-old has a pen pal in Australia who she's never met, and I actually don't know. Bad parenting moment. I don't know how she got in touch with this girl, but she has a pen pal in Sydney she's never met. And I haven't met at the connection. Isn't that terrible? When you were talking about your dad and maths, I have a memory of cribbage. Were you one of the first in the family that your dad, because card games were incredibly important as part of the quote unquote curriculum in your home, as I remember visiting you?
Yes. Yeah, card games taught us an awful lot. Taught us survival, cooperation, competition, and yeah, a lot of maths, and yeah, a lot about sort of looking after yourself. It was a competitive environment, and also I remember my dad was a workaholic, but the one time that he really switched off and had a laugh was when we took out a pack of cards and dealt out a few hands of 25 or whatever we were playing. So yeah, that was a big one. But he and we were really encouraged to play games, and I remember playing chess. My dad taught me how to play when I was about 4, and he was a pretty good chess player, and we used to get into that. And yeah, cribbage. What else did we play? A lot of games like Scrabble, and there was I did a brief stint of teaching English as a second language when I was living in Bangkok, and I remember when I was doing my TEFL certificate, my teacher said to me, in Thailand, we don't give children work, we play with them. And that applies to all ages. And when I was teaching English, if I didn't make my classes fun as well as educational, the kids wouldn't, they just
You'd
switch
have
off.
lost them. Yeah.
Yeah, so I remember thinking, God, then I thought back to my own days of being a kid playing Scrabble and playing other games that were also teaching me how to read, teaching me maths and things like that. And I said, that wasn't time wasted. That was good. That was good education there. You know what I mean? So.
Wow, fair play.
Yeah.
And so just to clarify for everybody, you never spent a day in a creche, in a play school, in a NINRA, in a primary school, or in a secondary school. None of those considered normal educational establishments in Ireland played any part in your childhood. And do you remember ever wishing to go to school or wondering what it was like or being curious, or how did you understand it?
Yeah, I never spent a single day in, I never even went into a school. I remember we used to, if we drive by a school, I used to be like, God, I wonder what it's like on the inside of those things. You know what I mean? And the first time I set foot in a building of formal education was, I was 28, and I did a year of theatre studies down in Kinsale in Cork.
Sorry, theatre studies. I didn't catch that. I think it.
Yeah, theatre studies. Yeah.
Theatre studies. Yeah.
And what was the other question you asked about schools? Oh yeah, what did we think of them? I suppose when we were young, there was a bit of a sense of us and them, in fairness. My family, there was a bit of stigma, I suppose it's natural enough if you're a family of homeschoolers in a country that's almost exclusively conventionally educated to feel a bit like an outsider. And I remember when we were doing taekwondo class and things like that when we were kids, kids used to come up with us and kind of poke fun and be like, at first they were kind of shocked. We'd say we didn't go to school and they'd be like, no, you're not, you're joking. That's impossible. And then they'd say things like, what's 1 + 1? Like, as though, well, if they don't go to school, they won't know what 1 + 1 is.
Yeah, you won't.
And then,
sums, yeah.
so we definitely had a bit of a bit of a like, oh, those school kids think they're so much smarter and blah blah blah. So there was in fairness, there was a bit of that. And as we got older, that kind of went away, that kind of grudging attitude. But now I have nothing against conventional education other than I haven't investigated it much, and most of the people I ask about their experience being conventionally educated, it's not a terribly positive feedback. I don't have any kids of my own, but if I were going to start a family now, it'd be the first thing I'd investigate very heavily is, you know, what would my kids be receiving? How would they spend their days in a conventionally educated environment? Because my experience is exclusively with alternative education, so I have nothing to compare that to. You know what I mean?
Okay. So you'd be open.
Just the same way as most of the people watching this video are investigating home education. My investigation would be on the other end.
On the other side, and you'd be open to it, or you're open to
Oh
checking.
yeah, absolutely. No, I've no stigma surrounding it, other than anecdotally. But my own experience, I have no negative experiences of conventional education. You know what I mean?
I would inform that as a decision. So the big question parents of will say two small ones. So somebody who has a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old at the moment are thinking, okay, so here's a guy who didn't do a leaving cert. So we are so conditioned in Ireland to think that without your leaving cert, you're one, a failure, and two, never going to access third level if that's what you'd like to do, and three, that you're going to end up on welfare or poor or not being able to support yourself. So do you want to talk a little bit about what you did? Like off the top of my head, I'd forgotten you were in Bangkok teaching English as a foreign language in that gas, but I remember you doing carpentry, and I remember you doing the theatre studies you mentioned in Kinsale, yeah. So do you want to talk a bit about what you did when you would have been the age when other people were doing leaving cert and
Sure.
Third level, yeah.
Okay, so like I said, when I was younger, we were taught how to work with our hands, and our home situation transposed into a horse training operation from food growing when I was probably 10 or 11 years old. And by the time I was 12, I had my first part-time job, working with racehorses, cleaning out stables, bringing them in and out of field and so on. And by 14, I had a full-time job working with racehorses. At 16, I decided I didn't want to do that anymore and decided to start a carpentry apprenticeship, which I loved for the first year or two, and then started to get a bit bored of the repetitiveness of working on the building site. And luckily, at this point in my life, when I was around 18, 19, I fell in love with playing poker online, which I'd recently been introduced to. And within a few months decided that I wanted to stop doing the carpentry and switch over to playing poker. I was just nearly in my 4th year of carpentry, and I asked my parents if they thought it was a good idea because I wanted their advice. And they said that they thought that it was a great idea as long as it's what I wanted, as long as I was confident that it was the right idea, and that if I wanted to, I could just go back to carpentry, which was true. Thankfully, I had a lot of success in poker. I had a 5-year career at it, and I managed to become the #1 online player in Ireland. And
that's
made
no
a
mean
decent.
feat.
Sorry.
That's no mean feat. That's quite.
Yeah. And luckily there was a poker boom around that time, so there was plenty of money in it, so I was able to support myself off it. The lifestyle that came with poker was very it was quite a contrast to the lifestyle of a physical job. There was no time schedule, there was no socializing, there was no sunlight, no fresh air, and it was a very competitive, highly combative environment, which it was more like being a fighter than a game player. I look at it now. It was very taxing on the nervous system. It was very taxing on a person's mental sort of stability. It was a very tough environment. And after 5 years at it, I realized that I was kind of worn out from doing it, and my health had taken quite a knock. So I'd had asthma and eczema since I was a kid, and I realized that this lifestyle was not doing it any favors. So I decided to stop, and I moved to New York shortly after that, and worked in a pub. I decided the weather would be better there, and the social life would obviously be pretty great compared to sitting in my house being on the internet all day. So I moved to New York for about a year and worked at a bar, and
And you were
yeah,
about
that was
25 at that stage?
I was, yeah, 25, yeah. And when I got home from doing that, I met a woman, and we got together, and we decided to move to Thailand because she was already planning to do that before we met, to teach English. And we did that together. We did that for about a year. When I got back, what did I do when I got back? I went, my brother had just recently bought a bar, and I was working for him for a while. And yeah, then after that, when I was 28, I did theatre studies. And yeah, since then I've kind of been doing bits and pieces. But I've never had any trouble finding work. I've been lucky enough that both physical and mental work, I've had the capabilities to sort of do them to an okay standard at least. And yeah, at the moment, my health problems are not tip top. So I've been living in Morocco, moved to a better climate.
Okay.
My plan was to bring my TEFL certificate here and look for work as an English teacher, but as you know, with the lockdown thing, that's not really a goer at the minute. So I'm just kind of taking it easy at the minute. But yeah, I feel like I'm lucky enough now at the minute that any of the things that I've done in the past, carpentry, teaching, horse racing, poker, bar work, I could fall back on any of those, and I'd be fairly confident to jump into something new if it took my fancy. So work hasn't been a big issue for me.
Okay. And you were never worried that your lack of formal education, being certified by somebody else, was going to, like, it didn't impede you in going and looking for employment if you needed to, by the sounds of things?
It certainly didn't impede me from finding employment. It might have discouraged me from looking for particular types of employment.
Okay.
But something I've noticed about the way the world works is that if you really want something, that motivation to really go for something is enough of a fuel to kind of to achieve whatever you want to achieve. You just need to go for it. And I love the saying, whatever you're looking for, it'll be looking for you. So, that's,
Never heard that one before. That's a good one.
yeah,
What
it's
I'm
something.
taking from what you've said, I'm getting messages on my computer here that our Zoom time has about 6 minutes left, and I don't want to end mid-sentence, but
Right.
it's fascinating. And, I'm delighted. Thanks so much for sharing your story with us today. So what I'm hearing from you is that there seems to have been great variety in your experiences, great opportunity as well. So do you want to just list for people what countries you have? The fact that you've been able to live in countries I find very interesting, because a lot of people who have a conventional kind of lifestyle in Ireland want to go and travel places. I mean, I don't know anyone who says they don't want to travel, to be honest. It seems to be a thing people think they do if they won the lotto, is they do a lot of traveling. So you've done traveling not just as a tourist, which is very different to the experience of going and living in Thailand or Bangkok or wherever. Do you want to just list for people what countries you've actually spent time in?
Sure. I'm on my 4th continent at the minute. Um,
Are you counting 5 or 7? How does your atlas go?
I don't know, Monica. I never went to school. I don't understand stuff like that. So yeah, let me think. First time I moved away, I went to New York. So I was in America for, I can't remember the exact, it was somewhere between 6 months and a year. Then when I came back, I lived in Cork for a little over a year, and I moved from there straight to Bangkok, and I was there for
Cork
7
is
months.
a different country, it has to be said.
Different continent.
You're counting Cork as a continent. Okay, we have a few extra
Exactly.
ones. Yeah.
So I went from Cork to Bangkok then back to Ireland, and now I'm in Morocco since, well, I came here in November, and then I went home for a few weeks in January. So I've been here for 5 months. The language barrier is always an inconvenience, but at the minute I'm getting my French pretty good over here to speak French as well as Arabic and Berber. And in Bangkok, I took a lot of lessons, but it's such a vastly different language. There's over 70 characters in the alphabet, and it's I only, it was still very rudimentary. But yeah, like I said about the job thing, there's always a way, there's always loopholes, there's always a way around it. And if you just kind of jump in and go for something, and your attitude is one of that, you know, sort of beginner's mind, that you're not too defeatist going in, I find you know, there's always people there who'll help you out. There's always you know, there's always ways to get through it, you know.
Fantastic. That's a great summary. So I like your notion of beginner's mind. And when I'm asked about why I didn't actually send any of my children to school, I always say, well, school would have been kind of, I liked being with them on a positive thing. And I think in terms of the things they were able to learn and what they were able to put their energy into, I feel, without slagging off teachers or you know, people who good educationists, I feel that school would have been a waste of kids' times. But when people ask me what I'd like as the one lesson for my children to learn at the end of it, I'd say that there isn't only one way to do anything. And I really think you've given us a big insight into that today, Jude. So
Thanks.
thanks a million.
No, not at all.